Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Seeds of Impact. Last episode, we talked about how to make your brand stand out from all the noise. And today, we are diving in deeper into that subject in a conversation with Joe Byerly about how to use thought leadership to set your business apart. Joe is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel and the founder of From the Green Notebook, an online publication and podcast. From the Green Notebook provides leaders with professional development and personal growth through curated content to encourage leaders to reflect, grow, and share from their experiences. Thanks for being here, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Hannah. And I appreciate all the work we've done together over the last 9 months or so.
Yeah, it's been great. I'm excited to have Joe on the podcast. We worked with Joe to revamp his website not too long ago, and I'll definitely include that in the description. And I'd love to just start on that note with, can you tell us the story about what started From the Green Notebook? How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I was working on a similar project for the Army. It was like an Army version of From the Green Notebook. And we didn't have a budget, and we were working within existing systems. And I felt like we were hitting red tape at every turn. And it was just like basic stuff. And so finally, as we were finishing, like it looked like a web page from the like early 90s. And I was very disappointed in it. And at the same time, there was a lot of military blogs starting to pop up about strategy, people's personal experiences, stuff like that. And I just watched these folks and thought, well, maybe I could do something like that. And so I launched From the Green Notebook. And originally when I started, I didn't put my name on it because that was like it still is, I think, for a lot of people, but it's a really big deal to put your name out there and your ideas out there for others to dissect, for others to read. And so and it took me, I think, like 6 months of publishing anonymous content before I finally put my name on it. And I remember watching people share and talk about the author online in a very positive light. And I got jealous of this anonymous author getting credit when it was me that was writing it. And so I ended up, through the encouragement of a bunch of people, just finally writing by Joe Byerly the first time. And haven't looked back since. I think like that was 2014 when I finally put my name on it. I started the blog in 2013. So it's been going now it's a teenager now.
I'm sure there have been plenty of growing pains with that too, as you have evolved into a teenager business. Now, I'd love to talk a little bit more about what you're mentioning when you first started out. You didn't have your name on it initially. Were you ever trying to grow the publication beyond yourself because you didn't put your name on it, or was that just something that naturally happened?
I think if you were to look at the evolution of From the Green Notebook, everything came, everything was like a natural outgrowth of the work that was already being done for the most part. But yeah, I did not have a plan at all. It was just going to be a personal blog. And then as people saw that it was getting traction and people were reading it, I would have friends approach me and ask if they could post something. And I was like, yeah, sure. It's not a big deal at all. And then I started getting email submissions from folks asking if I would publish their piece. And at first I was doing all the editing, all the posting, not just on the blog, but on social media, and then realized I needed help. So I started asking other volunteers within the military to help me out. And since 2017, we've had this revolving door of folks who've come in and even to this day edit the post, serve as like an editor in chief role. And then it just varies. We had somebody who was uploading the post, finding the images, posting on social media, and now that's back to me again. So there's been no overarching strategy or plan. It's kind of evolved. Even our three content pillars, read, write, reflect, those grew out of years of writing to finally like looking at what we had written or what we were publishing and things that I was passionate about and saying like, what does it boil down to? And it became those three pillars for the website. So like, that's when I say like almost everything was this natural outgrowth from work that was already being done.
Yeah, and You mentioned read, write, reflect, and now you also have the podcast portion of the website. So how did that evolve? How did that come out of all of that?
Yeah, I had just gotten back from Afghanistan in 2020, and I remember I was sitting on a buddy's back patio. We were catching up. Hadn't seen him since I deployed, and I was asking him what he wanted to do, and he told me he had this dream of becoming a Audible narrator, and I got this idea, and there were other people like, "Hey, you need to have a podcast." Everybody has a podcast, but I did not want a podcast. I didn't have the time. I thought it was too much. Like it was a big leap for me to put my uh, writing and my ideas out there. Then it was even bigger leap to put my voice out there. And even now, like I would say within the last 2 years, I finally started uploading videos on social media. So that was like a step process. But going back to your question, so that's what my buddy said. This was a dream of his, and I was like, "How about I help you? Why don't you start a podcast under the umbrella of From the Green Notebook?
Okay.
I'll find sponsors, stuff like that, and then you just like you could read post." And then we decided, well, what if we did like at least one or two interviews, like once a month? And so he agreed to it. He said, why don't you be my first guest? And I agreed to that. And somebody listened to it and was like, hey, you guys have a good chemistry. Why don't you just co host the podcast? So then I became a podcast co host. Shortly after that, we never read the blog post, which is what I originally thought of. And we ended up interviewing, we got a series of interviews, and we got about 8 in. And he was like, it's too much work. Like, it's too much time editing. It's too much time researching, like thinking through how you're going to piece an interview together. Like even figuring out questions ahead of time, like you did for this one. And he just quit. Like, and it wasn't like, hey, I'll do one more and then I'm done. It was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Cold turkey.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden I had sponsorships, I had episodes lined up to do. And I realized that doing it by myself was a lot of fun. I found out it's a lot harder when you have a co-host trying to organize an interview to where it's good on the ears for the listener. And so this ended up like it worked out great.
Yeah, I love that you're hitting on a lot of things that I want to talk about with you. But just hearing the natural progression, how you kind of just tested things out to see what was going to fit into your strategy, and a lot of what we talk to people about is when it comes to content creation, making sure that you're doing something that is sustainable for your business, that is right for you and your audience, because there are so many different avenues you can go down when it comes to any sort of marketing and content creation. So I love to hear just the natural progression that you had. One of the things you mentioned that I would like to talk about a little bit more is the idea of just like resistance that you had, right? You were hesitant about putting your name on the blog initially, and you weren't sure whether or not you wanted to do the podcast. So when you hit those moments of struggling to share your expertise and struggling to shift into new mediums, how do you personally overcome that?
Yeah, I think the way I do it, and when Ryan Holiday and I were having a discussion about it, and he put it in like really good terms. He's like, you're turning down the dial of stress, of pressure that you're putting on yourself. And so for me, it was this idea of I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm just sharing what I do. I'm just like starting a conversation that other people can have, whether at work or on social media. But that's all I'm doing. I'm just putting conversation starters out there. And I think like that was the big thing. And it's like ebbed and flowed over the years. I know like sometimes I'll record a podcast episode and we'll finish and then I'll reflect on it and be like, that was terrible. And I'll just start kicking myself in the butt. I should have asked this. I should have asked that. The flow is off, all this. And then I'll usually ask somebody to listen to it and give me some feedback. And I've found that I'm usually the worst critic for myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's like another important aspect too for folks getting started. Like if you're a horrible critic, I think that's a good thing because it forces you to take it seriously, to maybe have another set of eyes or ears look at your content. But I think if you think yours like is the best, the best thing since sliced bread, everybody needs to listen to you. You're a genius. I don't know. I question folks that have that. And, you know, we've published over 1,000 articles on the website, and we do get submissions where people think they wrote, like a New York Times bestseller in 600 words, and it doesn't make any sense. And so I think there's like a degree, I think it's a good thing to have that self-doubt and that imposter syndrome a little bit when you're getting started, and then every now and then to come back to that.
Yeah, a healthy dose of that and just always learning and growing from the things you're putting out there. Now, it takes a lot of time to build any sort of brand, to gain any kind of expertise. So for people who are just getting started with the idea of, I want to integrate my expertise, I want to build up my thought leadership platform into their business, what first steps do you recommend they take?
Yeah, I think just do it. Just put it out there. And I think you have to have zero expectations. I think we look at people who have large followings on social media, people who have very large platforms, and we think that if we put something out there, we're going to be able to replicate that overnight. Some of the best authors I know joke around that they were like multi-decade overnight successes. And so there's a really great saying that like a group of us have, and I heard it from Billy Oppenheimer, who heard it from Ryan Holiday, and I think Steve Pressfield has a version of it, but it's essentially like the work is the win. And I think like if you enjoy putting content out and 25 people listen to it, like you enjoyed putting the content out.
Yeah.
I think it's when you flip that and you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you're doing it for the affirmation, you're doing it for the followers, the clicks, the metrics. I would imagine that it's going to be pretty disheartening, and you won't get over that period of a lot of people aren't listening to you yet. And so now there are people out there who just for whatever reason seem to strike gold, and they'll put a couple things out there and they'll just come out of nowhere. But even then, there was usually like a big trial and error story somewhere in the background that finally led them to that point. And so I think that if you worry about the metrics, if you worry about the growth right away, you're sapping joy from the process. I love writing. I love doing the podcast. It hurts my feelings when nobody reads it or an episode doesn't do as well as I think it should. But I think the thing is like, I actually enjoy the work I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really great starting point, and that's something that we actually talk about with another guest, is just the idea of finding joy in content creation. And it's really easy for anyone in business to get caught up in the so-called vanity metrics, right? How many likes, how many shares, did it hit a certain number, instead of really focusing on how impactful was this? Was this the right message? Was I talking to the right audience? Because sometimes, you're going to find your next client or your next customer through the post that did 25 likes versus 250 likes. You never know where you're going to find the next gold, like you said.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's funny too, because like, and this is another thing that people who are creative folks, and I'm sure you have had this experience too, is that there's like, you'll have a project that you're working on, like whether it be a book, a video, a podcast, a blog post, whatever. And you put a lot of time, effort, and energy into it, and you throw it out into the universe, and it's like dull. Like you could, like it's dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. And then there's times where, like, for example, there was like a day where I came in and I just had this like flash of an idea and maybe spent 5 minutes on a post. And all of a sudden, like it gets like 75,000, 100,000 impressions, or, like it literally goes viral. And I actually get mad at those. I'm like, like why? Why can't you do it? The stuff I really work hard on. So I think it's, if you can again rob yourself of a lot of joy in the process by looking at those things constantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a balance. So, one of the things you also mentioned earlier is that when you started from the Green Notebook, there were a lot of other people who were doing a very similar thing. Can you talk to us more about what were some things you did to make your brand stand out, whether that be from the knowledge side or other content and marketing things you were doing?
Um, I think what was different about mine was that at the time, at least in my context, people were writing about military strategy and kind of overarching like meta issues. And I'm writing about day to day challenges people were facing and the kind of practical approaches to getting through them. But it's funny that you mentioned that. Like I remember like 3 or 4 years ago, I had this idea of I want to go mainstream with what I do. I call it like jumping the curb. Like,
Mhm.
I think we all have like a very small like niche sometimes, and you want to be much bigger and you have a much larger audience. And I was telling this guy this, who's a professor of an entrepreneurial course at Brown University, whose students went on to create these huge, like very successful products. And he told me, he's like, why would you change anything? He's like, you have a brand, it's very niche. And what you do, you have, you do thought leadership or whatever, you do reading, writing, reflection in a military space to a military veteran audience, that are folks who are wanting to become more self-reflective, to read more. That is very niche. And he was telling me that he worked, I think, for like Betty Crocker or something. And he was like, I was creating brand out of powder in a box. Like I was creating a backstory about Betty Crocker for powder in a box. And he's like, that is hard to do. He's like, what you're naturally doing
Mhm.
is your brand, and that's different. And when he said that, I started looking around and I realized that yeah, I could be like anybody else that's doing, leadership podcast and interviews. But I was like, but when I reach out, especially pitching the show to potential guests, big name guests, yeah, like they could talk to a particular, like, the startup audience, the very affluent audience, the blue collar audience, whatever. Their podcast for that. But if they wanted to talk to a military leader who has a very niche military audience, then the way to do that is through my show.
Yeah.
And so I've been able to get guests that were on Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, Ryan Holiday, Brene Brown, Mel Robbins, because I did look different. And I think going back, I was trying to be like other people. And I realized that like I just needed to be me
Mhm.
and focus on what made me different. And so I don't know. I don't know, like, as you talk to folks, if they are trying to be somebody else or if they are looking at what makes them unique. What do they
Mhm.
uniquely offer that other people don't? And try to like double down on that.
That I think is a trap that a lot of content creators, business owners get into is trying to be everything to everybody instead of really honing in on their unique value proposition and what makes their content, their business different. And one of the most valuable forms of any marketing is highly targeted marketing. So if you are not really focusing on your niche, then you have the opportunity. You just lose the messaging and any content that you're putting out there.
Yeah, I think you end up, you're right. Like you end up watering it down. And another one of my favorite authors and like famous marketer is Seth Godin. And he has this saying, he's like, we're not for everyone.
Yeah.
And he goes, I think it's like, if you're for everyone, then you're for no one. And I think about that a lot. Like, and I push back against this early on. So this isn't like something I came into it with. But yeah, I have an avatar in mind of the person who is on my website, who's listening to the podcast, who's reading my newsletters. And before I was like very grand, anybody could benefit from this. Anybody would see value in this. And now it's a very niche person. And often it looks like a younger version of myself, the version of myself that was looking for this stuff before I created it.
I love that. And when you got to this point of realizing that, okay, the thing that is really setting you apart and setting your publication apart was you just being yourself. Did you find it hard to lean into being authentic, or was that something you had to be intentional with?
That's a really good question, Hannah. I think w- once I finally realized that, and this is another thing, I was pushing back against that for so long. A lot of the folks who came on the team like very early on, I had this like mindset of like, we could do this together. From the Green Notebook will be this thing, and I will be like just a member of it. And I realized that like I'm a key person of it. You know who, like one of my favorite creators of all time. Do you know who Jim
Mhm.
Henson is?
Yes.
Yeah, like the Muppets. And Jim was like the main guy. Like when we think of the Muppets and Sesame Street and all of that, like we think of Jim Henson. But when you read his story and how he did it, it was like a team where even though he was the face of it, when opportunities came up, I was trying to remember like what movie. I think it was the Muppets Go to Hollywood. I think it was like
Mhm.
that first movie. Like they wanted him to direct it, but he passed it off to Frank Oz. He was like, "You got this." So like he didn't need to necessarily be the person doing everything. But
Mhm.
I think he started recognizing that like he was the Muppet brand. And so for me, that was like that took me a while. That took me like 6, 7 years to, before the teenage years, to get to this mind space of like, I am that person and I just need to lean into, who I am. And I was talking to somebody one time and he said, uh, like, have character, don't be a character. And I think we see that, especially in what I do. Like, there's like a brand of vet bro that's out there. Like, everybody's got like a certain hat, everybody's got a beard, like, everybody looks the same that's doing in the space. And so, for me, is recognizing that like I bring a different flavor and to embrace that and to not let that go, almost like hold on to it like a football and just keep running with it. And so far, I mean, I think it's working.
Well, it seems like you've built up a lot of trust as you've built out the authenticity piece. And you've mentioned a couple times how you also have this team that you're bringing in, especially because you've got a revolving door, not necessarily, here are the people who have been here since the beginning. You might have somebody here for a while as an editor. You are bringing in guest authors all of the time. How do you continue to build that trust, lean into the authenticity while still bringing other people into the fold?
I think it's like having swim lanes. And so for me, like the podcast, I've realized that like only I can do that and nobody else can. Or the newsletters. There's been times over the years where people have offered up to help out with them and maybe take on a couple Sundays or a monthly. And I've like, that's kind of like my sacred space within the From the Green Notebook umbrella. So I think like that's pretty much it. So for me, in my mind at least, like the blog is kind of like this military, I won't say free for all, but it's an open space. It's an open forum.
Mhm.
Whereas like there's certain rooms within that forum that are just mine and mine alone. But the one thing, Hannah, that I will say is while I think I have success in terms of longevity, this thing, like this platform, could be way bigger. And there's certain skill sets that I recognize that I don't have, that somebody else coming in could have, and would end up, taking this in a completely different direction, or bring us to a much larger audience. But I haven't gotten there yet. So I think it's important just to recognize that while I am, I am from the Green Notebook, and From the Green Notebook is me. I'm also, there's an aspect of me that's holding back the platform and preventing it from, reaching a level of growth that it's possible, but I'm just like, I'm not ready for that yet.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to identify and to recognize as a business owner. Like what are your goals with that? And having those kind of be the kind of like the lighthouse that's guiding you along the way, right? And making sure that you're focusing on the right metrics, the right content. On that note, then I'd love to hear about how, as you're navigating all that, are you defining really success for yourself with the platform and kind of having that steer the direction of content to make sure that things are fresh and that you're still having an impact through the platform?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting because I love the platform for the work. Like in this instance for me, the work is the win itself. Like it's not necessarily the platform that is how I define success. It's kind of like the opportunities that are deriving from it. So, like right now, I'm working on a book with Ryan Holiday. Is one of my favorite authors early on in the evolution of From the Green Notebook. And now, like, we're working on a project together. I'm getting the opportunity to speak to audiences about reading, writing, and reflection and how that makes you a better leader and more self aware. I'm getting other writing opportunities. I'm getting to have like one on one conversations with folks who read something that it really resonated with them, and they like are looking to dive deeper into it. So I think for me, I think I'm defining success a little bit differently right now. In terms of what opportunities, like From the Green Notebooks, like the Giving Tree right now, and it's like providing me with amazing opportunities. But that came after a decade plus of a lot of like planting and care and feeding of the product.
And success looks different for everybody. So thanks for sharing that with us. Now, if you were to go back and start over with From the Green Notebook, what is one lesson essentially from your own green notebook that you would implement at the very start that you would want any business leader to know?
I think you do have to have some sort of strategy in place. And especially when it comes to like web design, because I think that can get like really expensive and be one of those areas that you're constantly going back. I mean, it would be like building a house without blueprints. And then, you just keep like tacking rooms on, maybe a second floor, maybe a garage. Maybe you rip down the garage and you put something else out. Maybe you throw something else and you end up getting this like really hodgepodge Frankenstein. And that's what happened to me. It just took me a while to figure out what it was that I really wanted to do. And that is probably been the most expensive part of this whole process. I think this is like 3.0 for From the Green Notebook in its evolution of what it's looked like over the years. And it just took me a while to get there. And so I think maybe if I would have like, and I don't know, Hannah, like if I would have sat back and been like, okay, the three content pillars are read, write, reflect, and we're going to build a website around that. And, you know, um, so I think like that took learning. But now that I've been doing this for a while too, there's a lot of books, there's a lot of, podcasts like this one people can listen to where you can actually learn the science behind this stuff. Like, well, what makes a website sticky? There's a lot of data, a lot of metrics on that now. And I didn't read any of that stuff. So I was just like trial and error, just again, building rooms, tearing them down, moving the house around, maybe even changing entire plots and moving them over. So I think that like if you were going to invest money in a website is to do your homework up front. And I'm gonna add one caveat to that too. I don't know about you, but like I can't tell you how many people since the beginning of From the Green Notebook have come to me because they saw what I was doing, saw what we were doing as a team, and they started a podcast, a newsletter, or a website. And they went out, they bought like all the nice equipment, put all the nice money, all the money into a very nice, well designed website. And then when it came to actually doing the work, they made it maybe a month. I think at most I've seen somebody make it like 2 or 3 years, and then it just fades away and dies. Like it's too hard. They weren't passionate enough about the work itself, and we're more focused on the outcome. So I think, if you are going to make an investment, is to start low, try it for a little bit and see if it's something that you actually enjoy doing. And again, doing it for the work itself, not for the likes, not for the impressions, not for, some exponential growth. And if you do that and you enjoy it, then you can still be doing it 13 years later. Because now the website has, I think last checked, like it's had 3 million visitors. And then the podcast, we've recorded, I think we've released 162 episodes. So again, the guy like 8 episodes in is like, I'm done. And now we're at like episode 162.
Yeah.
And that's over 500,000 downloads. So I think like there's a superpower in consistency, and to keep doing something. You just have to be passionate about it, and you have to love it, and you got to make space for it in your life. So that's a really long answer to the question of do your research ahead of time.
Yeah, the foundation makes all the difference. Just like the house analogy, right? If you don't have your foundation right, leads to a lot of issues down the road. So I think that's a really helpful answer. I just want to finish with a couple rapid fire fun questions to close.
Okay.
Could you share with us, what is your favorite color at the moment?
I'd say green. That's an easy one.
I was really curious if it was going to be your favorite because it's also part of your brand.
Yeah.
What song has been stuck in your head lately?
Oh man. Canceled by Taylor Swift is that's been on repeat lately.
I think Taylor Swift has probably been, at least at the time of this recording, on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, and I'll add one more too. I just started watching The House of Guinness on Netflix, and that soundtrack on Spotify is phenomenal. So I've been listening to that a lot.
Now, I'll include these in the description, but can you share the best way for people to connect with you and From the Green Notebook?
Yeah, so website is fromthegreennotebook.com. You can listen to the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can look me up on LinkedIn. That's where I'm the most active. We're on Instagram, From the Green Notebook, and X, not as active on there as we used to be. And then within the website itself, you can sign up for our monthly reading list newsletter, which is 3 to 5 curated book recommendations for readers. And then on also buried in there somewhere, you got to find, it's kind of like an Easter egg. I do a weekly reading list, but a weekly newsletter, which I also now double post that on the blog. But that's something I've been doing since 2021, is this weekly newsletter. So there's like a bunch of different offerings within the website. Just got to click around and look around.
Great. Well, we will share those in the description. Thank you so much for your time, Joe, for chatting with us about your journey with From the Green Notebook. You have impacted so many people with your thought leadership and the thriving community that you've built. And in our next episode, we're going to transition into the topic of web development. This is a perfect segue. We're going to specifically be talking about how to create a website that is moving the needle for your business 24/7 so that you don't have to be active in your business 24/7. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and our newsletter so you don't miss that topic. Thanks for listening to Seeds of Impact, and we'll see you next time.